The rain had not stopped for 3 days. Ilara Vance pressed her back against the hollow of an ancient oak, her breath coming in shallow gasps that burned her lungs. Blood seeped through the torn sleeve of her gray wool dress where a branch had caught her during the fall. Or perhaps it was where one of Hargrove's men had grabbed her before she'd bitten his hand and run. She couldn't remember anymore. Everything had blurred into a single desperate truth. Keep moving or die. Through the sheets of rain she heard them. Dogs, men's voices, getting closer. 3 days ago she had been Ilara Vance, trusted bookkeeper to the Hargrove family, keeper of their financial secrets, invisible and reliable. Now she was a fugitive, accused of theft, stripped of her reputation, hunted like an animal through the ashwood forest, all because she had told the truth. She pressed her palm against her mouth to stifle a sob. The ledgers. Those damned ledgers. She should have looked away. Should have pretended the numbers added up. Should have done what every sensible person did when they discovered their employers were monsters. But Ilara had never been sensible. Her mother had always said it would be her downfall. It had started 6 days ago. Lord Edric Hargrove had summoned her to reconcile the household accounts before his daughter's wedding. Lady Delphine Hargrove was to marry the Duke of Ravenmore in a fortnight, the social triumph of the decade. Everything had to be perfect, and Ilara, meticulous Ilara, had found the imperfections. Investments that existed only on paper. Loans taken against assets that had already been sold. Pension funds for servants that had been emptied years ago. And worst of all, a trail of forged documents designed to transfer the Duke's properties into Hargrove control within months of the wedding. They weren't just embezzlers. They were predators. And the Duke of Ravenmore was their biggest prey. Ilara had faced a choice: stay silent, collect her wages, and watch a man be systematically destroyed by the woman he planned to marry. Or speak. She had chosen to speak. The anonymous letter she'd sent to the Duke had been careful, detailed, and irrefutable. She'd included page numbers, dates, specific discrepancies that could be verified. She'd expected him to investigate quietly, to discover the truth himself, to call off the engagement with dignity. Instead, he'd confronted Delphine directly, at a dinner party, in front of 40 guests. The scandal had exploded across society like a powder keg. The Duke of Ravenmore publicly accusing his fiancée's family of fraud. Delphine weeping, denying everything. Lord Hargrove demanding satisfaction. The engagement shattered in a single evening. And somehow, impossibly, the Hargroves had discovered that the anonymous letter came from within their own household. They had found her. The accusation came swift and brutal. Ilara Vance, they claimed, was a thief. A bitter, jealous servant who had stolen from the family and fabricated evidence to cover her crimes. They had proof. Documents she had never seen. Testimony from staff members who wouldn't meet her eyes. Within hours, she was cast out without references, without wages, without her belongings. Within a day, her name was poison in every household in the county. Within 2 days, she realized the Hargroves weren't content with ruining her. They wanted her silent, permanently. The first attempt came as she walked to the village seeking work, a carriage that veered too close, too fast. She had leaped into a ditch, heart pounding, telling herself it was an accident. The second attempt was no accident. 2 men outside the inn where she'd spent her last coins. She had escaped through a kitchen window while they questioned the innkeeper. Now, on the 3rd day, she was running through a forest in a storm, bleeding, exhausted, and utterly alone. The barking grew louder. Ilara pushed off from the tree and forced her legs to move. The ground was slick with mud and fallen leaves. Every step was agony. Her boots were soaked through, her fingers numb, her vision blurring at the edges. She had done the right thing. She had told the truth. And the truth was going to kill her. Through the rain, she saw the outline of a road. A real road, with wheel ruts and stones. If she could reach it, perhaps a carriage would pass. Perhaps someone would help. She stumbled out of the tree line just as her legs gave out. The mud was cold against her cheek. Rain hammered her back. She could hear the dogs clearly now, their excited baying announcing they had found the scent. This is how I die, she thought. Face down in the mud, killed for honesty. The sound of hoofbeats made her lift her head. A single rider was approaching through the storm, moving fast. Behind him, a black carriage with lanterns swaying in the wind. Ilara tried to raise her hand, tried to call out, but her voice was barely a whisper, and darkness was creeping into the edges of her vision. Please, she thought, please see me. The horse slowed, stopped. A man dismounted, his silhouette tall and broad against the gray sky. He moved toward her with purpose, his greatcoat whipping in the wind. Then he was kneeling beside her, turning her over, and she saw his face. Her heart stopped. She knew that face. Every person in 3 counties knew that face. Soren Ashcroft, the Duke of Ravenmore, the man whose engagement she had destroyed. His gray eyes widened with recognition. You, he breathed. For a moment, neither of them moved. Rain streamed down the Duke's face, plastering dark hair to his forehead. His expression was unreadable, carved from stone like the ancient statues in cathedral alcoves. Ilara waited for the disgust, the anger, the cold dismissal. Instead, he looked over his shoulder toward the forest, where the sound of dogs was growing closer. How many? He asked, his voice clipped. 3 men. Her own voice was barely audible. Maybe 4, with hounds. His expression shifted. Not sympathy. Something harder. Decision. Can you stand? I don't know. He didn't wait for her to find out. In one swift motion, he scooped her from the mud, lifting her against his chest as though she weighed nothing. Pain lanced through her injured arm, and she bit back a cry. You're bleeding, he observed. I noticed. He carried her toward the carriage, his stride never faltering despite the mud and rain. The footman had already opened the door, his face carefully blank as he watched his master carry a bedraggled, bleeding stranger inside. The Duke set her on the velvet seat with more care than she expected. Then he turned to the footman. There are men in that forest with dogs. When they emerge, inform them that you saw a woman running north toward the river crossing. Give them no other information. Your Grace. Do it. The footman bowed and disappeared into the rain. The Duke climbed into the carriage and closed the door. In the dim lamplight, Ilara could see him clearly for the first time. Sharp jaw, straight nose, eyes the color of winter storms. He was younger than she had imagined, perhaps 30, but his expression carried the weight of someone who had learned early that the world was not kind. He sat across from her, watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. You're Ilara Vance, he said. It was not a question. Yes. The bookkeeper who sent me that letter. There was no point in denying it. Yes. The woman the Hargroves claim stole £3,000 from their accounts. That's a lie. I know. Ilara blinked. You know? I've spent the last 3 days having my solicitors verify every claim in your letter. The discrepancies are exactly where you said they would be. The forged documents exist. The fraud is real. His voice remained flat, controlled. You told the truth, Miss Vance. The Hargroves have been lying since the day I met them. Relief washed through her, so powerful that tears pricked her eyes. Someone believed her. Someone finally believed her. Then why? She had to stop, had to calm her voice. Why did you confront them publicly? I thought you would investigate quietly, that you would end the engagement with dignity. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. I intended to, but Delphine discovered I had received information. She demanded to know its contents. When I refused, she accused me of inventing excuses to escape the marriage. His jaw tightened. My temper got the better of me. I confronted her in front of everyone, and now half of society thinks I'm a paranoid madman who destroyed an innocent woman's reputation. You're not mad. You were right. I was reckless. There's a difference. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. But you, Miss Vance, you knew what would happen when you sent that letter. You knew the Hargroves would discover the source eventually. You knew they would retaliate. I hoped I would have time to disappear. Yet you sent it anyway. Why? Ilara looked at him directly. Because you deserved to know. Because they were going to take everything from you. Your fortune, your properties, eventually your life if you became inconvenient. And because I couldn't live with myself if I stayed silent. The carriage lurched into motion. Through the rain-streaked window, Ilara saw the forest falling away behind them. Where are we going? She asked. My hunting lodge, 12 miles from here, private, well guarded. He paused. You need a physician, Miss Vance, and we need to talk. About what? His gaze held hers, gray and unflinching. About what happens next. He removed his greatcoat and draped it over her shivering shoulders. You destroyed my engagement and saved me from ruin in the same stroke. The Hargroves want you dead because of what you know, and I want them destroyed because of what they are. What are you suggesting? The Duke of Ravenmore leaned back against the seat, his expression shifting into something that might have been the ghost of a smile. I'm suggesting, Miss Vance, that we have a common enemy, and I never fight alone. The hunting lodge was smaller than Ilara expected, but no less imposing. Built from dark stone and ancient timber, it crouched at the edge of a private lake, like a sleeping wolf. By the time the carriage arrived, the rain had softened to a drizzle, and Ilara had stopped shivering. The Duke's greatcoat smelled of cedar and something warm she refused to identify. Staff appeared the moment they stopped. No questions, no curious stares. Just efficient movement and quiet competence. A housekeeper with steel-gray hair directed everything, her sharp eyes taking in Ilara's condition without comment. Mrs. Harwick, the Duke said, this is Miss Vance. She requires medical attention and a room prepared. She'll be staying indefinitely. Of course, Your Grace. Mrs. Harwick turned to Ilara with a curtsy. This way, miss. The physician is already being summoned. An hour later, Ilara sat in a chair beside a roaring fire, her arm properly bandaged, her wounds cleaned, her ruined dress replaced with a simple gray frock that belonged to one of the maids. The physician had declared her injuries superficial, but her exhaustion severe. Rest, he had prescribed. Rest and warmth and food. She had managed the warmth. Food sat untouched on the table beside her. And rest seemed impossible with the Duke of Ravenmore sitting across from her, watching her with those calculating eyes. You should eat, he said. I'm not hungry. You've been running for 3 days with nothing but fear to sustain you. Eat anyway. Ilara picked up a piece of bread, more to stop his staring than from any desire for food. It was fresh, warm, better than anything she'd tasted in a week. She ate it slowly, aware of his gaze never leaving her face. Tell me everything, he said finally. From the beginning. Leave nothing out. So she told him. She told him about being hired as the Hargrove bookkeeper 2 years ago, about earning their trust through meticulous work and silent discretion. She told him about the first discrepancy she'd noticed, the pension fund that didn't add up, and how she'd dismissed it as an error. She told him about finding more discrepancies, then more, until the pattern became undeniable. About discovering the forged documents in Lord Hargrove's private study, the ones designed to transfer the Duke's properties after the wedding. About realizing that Delphine's marriage wasn't about love or even status. It was about theft on a scale that would have destroyed him. They were patient, Ilara said. Methodical. They'd been planning this for years, before they even knew you would be the target. They choose wealthy, powerful men with complicated estates. Men who wouldn't notice until it was too late. Have there been others? I believe so. I found references to previous investments that failed, wealthy families that lost everything through what appeared to be bad luck. She looked at him directly. I think the Hargroves have been doing this for a generation. The Duke said nothing. Silence stretched between them. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, controlled, and utterly cold. My father died 5 years ago. He left me estates in 3 counties, investments across Europe, responsibilities I was barely prepared to manage. I was 25 and grieving and completely overwhelmed. His jaw tightened. The Hargroves approached me within a month of his funeral, offered their support, their connections, and their lovely daughter as a suitable match. I thought they were being kind. They were hunting. Yes, and I was too blind to see it. Ilara leaned forward. You couldn't have known. They're professionals. They've been doing this longer than either of us has been alive. But you saw through them. A bookkeeper with no connections, no power, no reason to risk herself. He studied her. Why did you care what happened to me? The question caught her off guard. She had asked herself the same thing 100 times during those desperate days of running. Because it was wrong, she said finally. Because I couldn't pretend it wasn't happening. Because... She stopped, then forced herself to continue. Because my father was destroyed by men like the Hargroves. He invested everything with a man who promised to make him wealthy. That man disappeared with every penny, and my father died 6 months later. My mother followed him within the year. Grief, the physician said. My sister and I were left with nothing but an aging aunt and each other. Understanding dawned in the Duke's eyes. You weren't just saving me, you were fighting them. All of them. I suppose I was. Ilara looked at the fire. And now I've lost everything because of it. My position, my reputation, my safety. The Hargroves won't stop until I'm dead, and even if they did, no one will ever hire the woman accused of theft and scandal. What if you didn't need to be hired? She looked up. What do you mean? The Duke rose from his chair, walking to the window. The rain had stopped, and moonlight was breaking through the clouds, silvering the lake beyond. The Hargroves believe they've won, he said. They've destroyed your credibility, forced me into public humiliation, and convinced society that I'm either paranoid or foolish. Right now, they're probably celebrating. That's not encouraging. It will be. He turned to face her. They've made a mistake, Miss Vance. They left you alive, and they left me angry. Separately, we're vulnerable. Together, he paused. Together, we could destroy them. Ilara's heart beat faster. How? I have resources they don't know about. Investigators, solicitors, connections in Parliament who owe me favors. I've been gathering evidence for days, but I'm missing the one thing that would make it irrefutable. What? You. He crossed the room until he stood before her. You've seen their ledgers. You know their methods. You can identify which investments are fraudulent, which documents are forged, which families have been victimized. Your testimony, combined with my evidence, would be enough to bring them down completely. My testimony is worthless. They've accused me of theft. No one will believe a disgraced bookkeeper over a noble family. They would believe the Duchess of Ravenmore. The room went silent except for the crackling fire. Ilara stared at him. You can't be serious. I'm always serious about strategy, Miss Vance. His gaze held hers, unwavering. Marry me. Become my Duchess. Under my protection, the Hargroves can't touch you. As my wife, your testimony becomes unimpeachable. We present a united front to society, the Duke and his new bride, exposing the criminals who tried to destroy them both. That's insane. That's tactical. He didn't waver. Think about it. You need protection. I need credibility. We both want justice. This solves everything. It solves nothing. We don't even know each other. I'm a bookkeeper. You're a duke. Society will never accept. Society will accept whatever I tell them to accept. His voice sharpened. I am the Duke of Ravenmore, Miss Vance. My family has held this title for 400 years. When I present you as my wife, no one will dare question my choice. But why would you choose me? Because you did what no one else would. You risked everything to tell me the truth, when a lie would have been safer. He knelt before her chair, bringing his eyes level with hers. I've spent 3 days wishing I had met you before Delphine, before the Hargroves, before any of this. And now you're here, and I'm asking you to help me finish what you started. You want me to marry you for revenge. I want you to marry me for justice. There's a difference. His voice softened. And if I'm honest, Miss Vance, I want you to marry me because you're the only person who's treated me like a man instead of a title in longer than I can remember. Alara felt her resistance cracking. Everything he said made terrible, beautiful sense. Protection, purpose, a chance to make the Hargroves pay for what they had done. But marriage? To a man she had met hours ago? If I do this, she said slowly, I want your word that we pursue justice for everyone they've harmed, not just revenge for what they did to you. Agreed. And I want access to all your evidence. Full partnership in the investigation. I won't be a decorative wife while you make decisions behind closed doors. His gaze sharpened. Surprise, perhaps, or approval. Also agreed. And if this falls apart, if I become a liability to you, you let me go. No arguments. That won't happen. Promise me anyway. The Duke of Ravenmore studied her, weighing her words. Then he extended his hand. I promise. Do we have an agreement? Alara looked at his hand. Strong, calloused in places that suggested he did more than simply give orders. The hand of a man who had just offered to make her untouchable, unstoppable, and unafraid. She had been hunted through forests and stripped of everything she valued. She had faced death for the crime of telling the truth. And now she was being offered a chance to fight back. Alara took his hand. We have an agreement. His grip was firm and warm, and something in his eyes shifted when she squeezed back. Then rest tonight, Miss Vance. Tomorrow we begin planning, and the day after that, we announce our engagement to the world. He released her hand and walked to the door, pausing with his fingers on the handle. Ilara, she said quietly. He turned. If we're going to be married, you should call me Ilara. For the first time since she had met him, the Duke of Ravenmore smiled. It was small, barely a curve of his lips, but it transformed his face into something almost human. Soren, he replied, and welcome to the war. Then he was gone, and Alara was left alone with the fire and the weight of the choice she had just made. She had been running for her life an hour ago. Now she was engaged to a duke, plotting the destruction of one of the most powerful families in the country. Her mother had been right. Her lack of sense was definitely going to be her downfall. Or possibly, just possibly, her salvation. Alara woke to silence and sunlight. For a disorienting moment, she couldn't remember where she was. The bed was too soft, the sheets too fine, the room too warm. Then memory crashed back. The forest, the rain, the Duke's hand pulling her from the mud, the proposal. She sat up slowly, her bandaged arm protesting the movement. Through the window, she could see the lake gleaming silver under a pale morning sky. No rain, no dogs. No men hunting her through the trees. Safe. For now. A knock at the door made her tense. Miss Vance? Mrs. Harwick's voice. His Grace requests your presence in the study when you're ready. I've brought fresh clothes and breakfast. The housekeeper entered with an armful of garments and a tray of food that smelled like heaven. Alara ate while Mrs. Harwick laid out the clothes. A simple but well-made day dress in deep blue, along with undergarments, stockings, and shoes that fit perfectly. How did you know my size? Ilara asked. His Grace sent a rider to the village at dawn. He's thorough. Mrs. Harwick's expression gave nothing away. Will there be anything else, miss? No. Thank you. 30 minutes later, Ilara stood outside the study door, her heart pounding harder than it had during the chase through the forest. Running from killers was terrifying. Facing the man she had agreed to marry was somehow worse. She knocked. Enter. The study was smaller than she expected, lined with books and maps, dominated by a massive oak desk covered in papers. Soren stood by the window, dressed simply in a dark coat and cream waistcoat. Without the rain and the drama, he looked younger, tired, human. You slept, he observed. A little? Good. We have work to do. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. Sit. We need to discuss terms. I thought we already discussed terms. We discussed generalities. Now we discuss specifics. He sat across from her, his expression businesslike. If this arrangement is to succeed, we need complete honesty between us. No secrets, no hidden agendas, no surprises. Agreed? Agreed. Good. Then here's my first honesty. He leaned forward. I need this marriage as much as you do. Perhaps more. Ilara frowned. I don't understand. You're a duke. You have power, resources. I have a reputation in tatters. His voice was flat. Thanks to my outburst at that dinner party, half of society believes I'm unstable. The other half believes the Hargroves' accusations, that I invented the fraud to escape an engagement I regretted. He looked at her directly. I'm a laughingstock. Ilara. My political allies are distancing themselves. My investments are being questioned. If I don't restore my credibility soon, everything my family built will crumble. And marrying me helps how? I'm accused of theft. You're accused by the Hargroves. When we prove they're criminals, those accusations become proof of your courage. He stood, pacing to the window. But it has to be perfect. Our story, our timing, our presentation. One mistake, and they'll use it to destroy us both. Ilara considered this. What story do you intend to tell? The truth. Modified. He turned to face her. I received an anonymous warning about the Hargroves. I investigated and discovered the fraud. In the process, I learned that a brave young woman had risked everything to save me and was being persecuted for her honesty. I rescued her, fell in love with her integrity, and proposed. Fell in love? Ilara raised an eyebrow. It's more palatable than formed a strategic alliance. Society loves romance. His expression remained neutral. In public, we'll be devoted newlyweds. In private, we'll be partners working toward a common goal. The arrangement benefits us both. And when the goal is achieved? When the Hargroves are destroyed? Soren paused before answering. Then we reassess, he said finally. Annulment is possible if we choose, or we continue as we are. The decision will be mutual. Ilara studied him, searching for deception and finding none. One more condition, she said. Name it. I want to learn. Everything. How to manage estates, how to navigate society, how to fight the way you fight. I won't be a decorative duchess who smiles and stays silent. If I'm going to be your partner, I need to be your equal. His brow lifted. Surprise, perhaps, or admiration. That will take time. I'm a fast learner. For the first time since she'd met him, Soren's smile reached his eyes. Yes, he said softly. I believe you are. He extended his hand across the desk. Then we have an agreement, Ilara Vance. Partners in all things until the Hargroves fall. She took his hand. His grip was warm, firm, and strangely reassuring. Partners, she agreed. Neither of them let go immediately. 3 days after their agreement, Alara stood in the entrance hall of Thornwood Manor, the Duke of Ravenmore's ancestral seat, and tried not to feel like an imposter. The hunting lodge had been intimate, manageable. This was something else entirely. Stone walls rose 4 stories high, adorned with tapestries depicting battles and coronations. A grand staircase swept upward like a frozen waterfall. Chandeliers dripped crystal from ceilings painted with scenes of classical mythology. And everywhere, in the portraits, in the carved crests, in the very air itself, the weight of 400 years of history pressed down on her. "It's a bit much," Soren said from beside her. "A bit?" "My ancestors believed in making an impression." He offered his arm. "Come, there's much to do." The next 4 weeks blurred into a storm of lessons, rehearsals, and preparation. Mrs. Pemberton, a formidable widow with silver curls, arrived the first morning to serve as Ilara's instructor in etiquette. She was thorough, demanding, and completely without mercy. A duchess does not slouch, a duchess does not fidget, a duchess enters a room as if she owns it, because she does. Mrs. Pemberton circled Ilara like a hawk evaluating prey. Again. Walk toward the mirror, shoulders back, chin level. No, not that high. You look arrogant. There. Now hold it. Ilara practiced walking, sitting, curtsying, and eating until her muscles ached. She memorized the ranks of nobility, the proper forms of address, which topics were acceptable in conversation, and which would end her social career before it began. Never discuss politics directly, Mrs. Pemberton instructed. Imply, suggest. Let others believe they reached conclusions themselves. That seems dishonest. That seems like society. In the afternoons, Soren took over. They worked in the study, surrounded by ledgers and documents, as he taught her the language of wealth. The Hargroves hide their fraud in complexity, he explained, spreading papers across the desk. They create layers of transactions, shell investments, fake partnerships. By the time anyone notices something wrong, the trail is too tangled to follow. But you followed it. Partially, thanks to your letter, I knew where to look. He pointed to a column of figures. This is one of their shell companies. It's supposedly invested in shipping ventures, but watch what happens when you trace the money. Ilara leaned closer, her eyes scanning the numbers. Years of bookkeeping had trained her to see patterns others missed. Within minutes, she spotted it. Funds moving in circles, never actually leaving Hargrove control, while investors believed their money was generating returns. "They're paying old investors with new investors' money," she breathed. "It's sustainable only as long as new money keeps coming in." Exactly. And when it stops, everything collapses. Everyone loses. Ilara looked up at him. "How long have they been doing this?" "At least 30 years. Possibly longer." Soren's expression was grim. "My father invested with them briefly decades ago. He withdrew his funds when something felt wrong. It may have saved our family." "Your father was wise." "My father was cautious. I intend to be thorough." In the evenings they dined together. At first the meals were formal, awkward, two strangers navigating unfamiliar territory. But as days passed, the silences grew shorter, the conversations longer. Soren told her about his sister Marguerite, who had married a French count and now lived in Provence with 4 children. About his mother, who had died when he was 12, leaving behind a library full of books he still couldn't bring himself to open. About the weight of being the last Ashcroft male, responsible for a legacy he had never asked for. "Sometimes I dream of disappearing," he admitted one evening, "selling everything, buying a small cottage somewhere no one knows my name, living like an ordinary man." "Would you be happy?" "I don't know. I've never been ordinary." He looked at her across the candlelight. "What do you dream of, Ilara?" The question caught her off guard. No one had asked her that in years. "Safety," she said finally. A place where I belong. People who see me as more than useful. She paused. And maybe, someday, the chance to build something that matters. What would you build? I don't know yet. But I'd want it to help people like me. People who fall through the cracks because they don't have titles or connections or family money. Soren's gaze lingered on her face. You continue to surprise me, Ilara Vance. Is that good? I'm beginning to think it's the best thing that's happened to me in years. A warmth kindled between them that had nothing to do with the fire. Ilara looked away first. We should review tomorrow's schedule, she said. Mrs. Pemberton wants to practice formal introductions. Of course. Soren's voice was neutral, but when she glanced at him, his eyes held something she couldn't quite name. Tomorrow, then. That night, alone in her chambers, Ilara stood at the window watching moonlight silver the gardens below. She was learning to walk like a duchess, speak like a duchess, and think like a duchess. But somewhere along the way, she had started to feel something she hadn't expected. Something dangerous. Something that had nothing to do with strategy. The invitation arrived on a Thursday morning, delivered by a rider in Hargrove livery. Ilara watched from the window as Soren spoke to the messenger, his expression revealing nothing. When he returned to the house, the sealed envelope in his hand, she knew something had changed. What is it? Lady Ashworth's spring ball. He set the invitation on the desk. 3 days from now, we're invited as the Duke and new Duchess of Ravenmore. Ilara's stomach dropped. Already? We haven't even announced the engagement yet. We announced it yesterday. My solicitors filed the papers, and I sent notices to 6 carefully chosen gossips. He almost smiled. By now, half of London knows the Duke of Ravenmore is marrying the woman who saved him from the Hargroves. And the other half? Thinks I've lost my mind. He picked up the invitation. Lady Ashworth is neutral. No connection to the Hargroves. No particular loyalty to me. Her ball is the first major event of the spring season. Everyone will be there. Everyone, including the Hargroves. Yes. Ilara forced herself to breathe. 3 days. 3 days to prepare for facing the people who had tried to kill her. I'm not ready. You're more ready than you think. Soren crossed to her, his eyes holding hers. I've watched you these past weeks. You've mastered etiquette, finances, strategy. You've memorized every name and title that matters. And most importantly, you've survived worse than a ballroom. Surviving and thriving are different things. Then we practice. He held out his hand. Dance with me. Ilara blinked. What? Dance. It's expected at balls, and you'll need to be comfortable in front of an audience. His hand remained extended. Trust me. She took his hand. He pulled her closer than she expected, one hand at her waist, the other clasping her fingers. Without music, they began to move. Slow, careful steps across the study floor. Relax, he murmured. You're rigid as a fence post. I'm concentrating. You're overthinking. Dancing is about feeling, not logic. His thumb brushed her waist, sending an unexpected shiver through her. Follow my lead. Let the movement happen. Gradually, her muscles softened. The steps came easier. She stopped watching her feet and started watching him instead. Better, he said. Now imagine we're at the ball. People are watching. What do they see? A duke dancing with a nobody. Wrong. They see a duke dancing with the woman who captured his attention, his respect, and his ring. They see someone worth noticing. His voice dropped. What do you want them to see, Ilara? She thought about the question, about the forest and the rain and the months of running, about her father, destroyed by men who faced no consequences, about every person who had ever dismissed her as insignificant. I want them to see someone they underestimated, she said softly. Someone who survived when she should have fallen, someone they can never dismiss again. Soren stopped dancing but didn't release her. Then show them exactly that. The ball arrived too quickly. Alara descended from the carriage in a gown of midnight blue silk, sapphires at her throat that Soren's grandmother had worn to her own wedding. Her hair was arranged in an elaborate style that had taken 2 hours. Her gloves were spotless. Her expression was calm. Inside, she was terrified. Lady Ashworth's ballroom blazed with 1,000 candles. Music swelled from an orchestra in the gallery, and everywhere, watching from corners, whispering behind fans, evaluating her every move, society waited to judge. Soren offered his arm. Ready? No. Good. Nerves keep you sharp. He led her toward the entrance. Remember, you belong here. I chose you. Anyone who questions that questions me. The majordomo announced them. His Grace, the Duke of Ravenmore, and Miss Alara Vance, his betrothed. Silence rippled outward like a stone dropped in water. Every eye turned. Every conversation stopped. Ilara kept her chin level, her spine straight, and her expression serene. She walked beside Soren as if she had done this 1,000 times before. Lady Ashworth approached first, a shrewd woman in her 60s with a reputation for making or breaking newcomers. Your Grace, she said to Soren, how delightful you could attend, and this must be the remarkable Miss Vance I've heard so much about. Lady Ashworth. Ilara curtsied exactly as Mrs. Pemberton had taught. Thank you for including us. Your home is magnificent. Isn't it? Lady Ashworth's eyes swept over Ilara, missing nothing. You're younger than I expected, and prettier. The gossips failed to mention that. Gossips often fail at accuracy. Indeed, they do. A glint of approval crossed the older woman's expression. I look forward to watching you navigate this evening, Miss Vance. It should be illuminating. As Lady Ashworth moved away, Ilara released a breath she hadn't known she was holding. Well done, Soren murmured. That was just one person. The most important person. Lady Ashworth's approval opens doors. He guided her into the crowd. Now comes the real test. They were halfway across the ballroom when Ilara saw them. Lord and Lady Hargrove, dressed in immaculate evening wear, smiling as if they hadn't ordered her death 3 weeks ago. And beside them, her golden hair gleaming in the candlelight, her expression poisonously sweet. Delphine. Their eyes met across the room. Delphine's smile widened, sharp as a blade, and Ilara realized the true battle was just beginning. Delphine moved through the crowd like a shark through calm waters. Ilara watched her approach, every instinct screaming to run. But running was no longer an option. She was the future Duchess of Ravenmore. She had to stand. Soren, darling. Delphine's voice carried just enough to attract nearby listeners. How wonderful to see you've recovered from your episode. Delphine. Soren's tone could have frozen the champagne. I wasn't aware you'd be attending. Lady Ashworth is a dear friend. She couldn't possibly exclude me. Delphine's gaze slid to Ilara, dripping with false sweetness. And this must be the little bookkeeper everyone's whispering about. How charming that you found someone so quickly, Soren. Some might call it suspicious. Some might call it fate, Ilara replied, keeping her voice level. Though I understand if the concept is foreign to you. Surprise flashed behind Delphine's smile. She hadn't expected the bookkeeper to have teeth. Brave words from a woman accused of theft. Delphine stepped closer, lowering her voice. Enjoy this evening, Miss Vance. It may be your last in polite society. Is that a threat? It's a prediction. Delphine's eyes glittered. My family has friends everywhere, powerful friends. Whatever fantasy Soren has constructed around you will crumble eventually. And when it does, she smiled. Well, we both know what happens to women without protection. Soren's hand tightened on Ilara's arm. Walk away, Delphine, now. Or what? You'll cause another scene? She laughed, light and musical. Please do. It only helps our case. She glided away before either could respond, leaving poison in her wake. Ilara realized her hands were shaking. She's rattled, Soren murmured. That speech was desperation, not confidence. It didn't feel desperate. Trust me, I know Delphine. When she's winning, she's silent. When she's losing, she attacks. He guided Ilara toward a quieter corner. Something has changed. Something has frightened them. What could frighten the Hargroves? Us. His gaze locked with hers. They expected you dead and I defeated. Instead, we're here, together, and they don't know what we're planning. He paused. We need to move faster. Whatever evidence we're gathering, whatever case we're building, it has to be ready soon. Before they strike first. How soon? Weeks. Maybe less. His jaw tightened. I'll send word to my investigators tonight. We accelerate everything. Across the ballroom, Ilara saw Lord Hargrove watching them, his expression unreadable. The hunt had reversed, but cornered prey was the most dangerous kind. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation and paranoia. Soren's investigators worked around the clock, tracing financial records, interviewing former Hargrove servants, documenting every discrepancy Ilara had identified. The evidence mounted: fraud, forgery, theft on a scale that would shock even the most jaded aristocrat. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. We need testimony, Soren said during one of their evening strategy sessions. Documents can be dismissed as fabrication. We need someone from inside the Hargrove household to confirm what we've found. Their servants are terrified. I saw it when I worked there. Ilara shook her head. They won't speak against the family. Fear can be overcome if the alternative is worse. Soren studied the papers spread before him. What if we could offer protection? Immunity? A new life far from Hargrove influence? That might work for some, but the ones who know the most are the ones most deeply compromised. Ilara thought of Mrs. Thornberry, the Hargrove housekeeper, who had helped falsify records for years. They're not just witnesses, they're accomplices. Then we offer them a choice: testify and receive mercy, or stay silent and share their employer's fate. Before Ilara could respond, a knock interrupted them. Mrs. Harwick entered, her face pale. Your Grace, a messenger has arrived, from Hampshire. Ilara's blood turned to ice. Hampshire, where her younger sister Marin lived with their aging aunt. Soren took the letter, scanning it quickly. His expression darkened. What is it? Ilara's voice came out strangled. What's happened? Your aunt received a visitor yesterday. A man claiming to be a solicitor, asking questions about your whereabouts. He looked up. And your sister? The room tilted. They found her. They know where Marin is. They know, but they haven't acted yet. Soren was already moving toward the door. I'm sending riders tonight. Your sister and aunt will be brought here under guard. They'll be safe within Thornwood's walls. And if the Hargroves reach them first? He stopped, turning back to face her. They won't. I promise you, Ilara. I will not let them hurt your family. The certainty in his voice anchored her. But underneath the fear, something else was building. A fury so cold and pure it frightened her. The Hargroves had tried to kill her. That was personal. But threatening Marin? Threatening a 17-year-old girl whose only crime was being Ilara's sister? That was war. When your riders bring them here, Ilara said in a low voice, I want to be part of whatever comes next. Not protected. Not sheltered. Part of it. Ilara, they made this personal, Soren. They made it about blood. She held his stare. I'm done hiding. I'm done being careful. I want them destroyed. He searched her face, weighing her words. Then, slowly, he nodded. Together then. We destroy them together. Together. That night, Alara didn't sleep. She stood at her window watching the road, waiting for the riders to return, praying they wouldn't be too late. Marin had always been the gentle one, the dreamer, the sister who believed the world was kind despite all evidence to the contrary. If the Hargroves touched her, Alara's hands clenched on the windowsill. There would be no mercy, no negotiation, no restraint, only ruin. The riders returned at dawn with Marin and Aunt Cordelia. Alara met them in the entrance hall, her heart pounding. When Marin stumbled through the door, pale, frightened, but unharmed, Alara pulled her into an embrace so tight neither could breathe. "You're safe," Alara whispered. "You're safe now." "Alara, what's happening?" Marin's voice trembled. "There were men asking about you. Strange men. And then these riders came and said we had to leave immediately. I'll explain everything, I promise." Alara pulled back, studying her sister's face. 17 years old with their mother's dark hair and their father's trusting eyes. Too young for any of this. "But first, you need to rest, both of you." Mrs. Harwick led them away to prepared chambers, leaving Alara alone with Soren. "They're safe," he said. "For now." Alara's voice was hollow. "But the Hargroves won't stop. They'll find another way to hurt me. Another pressure point. Then we eliminate their ability to hurt anyone." Soren moved closer. "I received word this morning. One of the Hargrove servants has agreed to meet with my investigators. Secretly." "Who?" "A woman named Agnes Whitmore, former lady's maid to Delphine. She left their service 6 months ago under unclear circumstances." Alara remembered Agnes, a quiet, efficient woman who had always seemed frightened of her own shadow. What does she know? Enough, apparently, to want protection before speaking. Soren's eyes were intent. "She's agreed to meet tomorrow night at an inn outside London. I want you there." "Me? Why?" "Because you worked in that house. You know these people. Agnes might trust you more than she trusts my investigators." He paused. "And because I promised you would be part of this. I meant it." The meeting took place in a private room above a coaching inn, far from prying eyes. Agnes Whitmore was thinner than Alara remembered, her face drawn with the particular exhaustion of someone carrying too many secrets. She startled when Alara entered, then slowly relaxed. "Miss Vance, they said you'd be here, but I didn't believe it." Agnes's hands twisted in her lap. "They said you were dead. They were wrong. I'm glad." Agnes's voice cracked. "What they did to you, what they tried to do, I knew it was coming. I should have warned you." "Why didn't you?" "Because I was afraid." Tears spilled down Agnes's cheeks. "I've been afraid for years. Lady Delphine, she's not what she seems. None of them are." "We know," Soren said gently. "That's why we need your help." Agnes's story emerged in fragments, punctuated by sobs and long silences. She had been Delphine's personal maid for 3 years. In that time, she had witnessed things that still haunted her nightmares. Delphine's rages when her plans were thwarted. Lord Hargrove's cold instructions to handle people who asked too many questions. Documents burned, witnesses intimidated, inconvenient people who simply disappeared. "There was a man," Agnes whispered. "A solicitor who discovered some of their fraud 2 years ago. He was going to report them. And then one morning, they found him in the river. Everyone said it was an accident. Too much drink." She shook her head. "It wasn't an accident. I heard them laughing about it afterward." Alara felt sick. "Will you testify to this? Publicly?" "I'll die if I do." "You'll die if you don't," Soren said softly. "The Hargroves don't leave loose ends. The only reason you're still alive is because they don't know what you've seen. The moment they suspect, I know." Agnes's voice was barely audible. "I know. That's why I'm here, because staying silent hasn't kept me safe. It's just delayed the inevitable. She looked up, her eyes red but resolute. I'll testify. God help me. I'll tell them everything. But you have to promise me protection. A new name. A new life. Somewhere they can never find me. You have my word, Soren said. As Duke of Ravenmore, I swear it. Agnes nodded slowly. Then she began to talk. Names, dates, crimes. A litany of horrors that painted the Hargroves not as embezzlers, but as monsters. When she finished, the room was silent. Ilara looked at Soren and saw her own fury reflected in his eyes. We have enough, she said. We have more than enough. His voice was iron. Now we end this. The night before everything changed, Ilara couldn't sleep. She found herself in the library, curled in a chair before the dying fire, trying to read and failing. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the faces of Hargrove victims, the drowned solicitor, the ruined families, herself, lying in the mud, waiting to die. Tomorrow they would present their evidence to Lord Blackwood, the Lord Chancellor, a man powerful enough to order an official investigation. If he believed them, the Hargroves would face justice. If he didn't, Ilara didn't want to think about that possibility. You should be resting. She looked up to find Soren in the doorway, dressed informally in shirt and waistcoat, his hair slightly disheveled. So should you. I never rest before battle. He entered the library, settling into the chair across from her. My father used to say sleep was for the victorious. Before a fight, you plan. Is that what you've been doing? Planning? Obsessively. He studied her face. You're frightened. Terrified. There was no point in lying. What if it doesn't work? What if the Chancellor dismisses our evidence? What if the Hargroves buy their way out of consequences like they always do? Then we find another way, and another, until justice is served. His voice softened. I told you once that I never fight alone. I meant it. Whatever happens tomorrow, we face it together. Together. The word felt different now than it had weeks ago. Fuller. Warmer. Soren. Why are you really doing this? And don't say strategy. Don't say revenge. Tell me the truth. He didn't answer immediately. The truth, he said finally, is that I was half dead before you appeared. Going through the motions of a life I'd never chosen, surrounded by people who saw only my title, preparing to marry a woman who saw only my fortune. He looked at her, and then there you were, bleeding in the mud, defiant even when you were dying, having risked everything for a man you'd never met because it was right. His voice dropped. You reminded me that courage still existed, that honor still mattered, that I could be more than just the last Ashcroft heir going through the motions. He reached out, taking her hand. I'm doing this because of you, Ilara. Because you made me want to fight again. Ilara's breath caught. That's not strategy. No. His thumb brushed across her knuckles. It's not. What is it then? He looked at her. Really looked. And she saw the walls behind his eyes finally crumble. I don't know what to call it yet, but I know I don't want to lose it. He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her fingers. Whatever happens tomorrow, I need you to know that this stopped being an arrangement for me a long time ago. How long? Somewhere between watching you negotiate terms from a sickbed and seeing you stare down Delphine without flinching. His smile was soft, almost wondering. You're extraordinary, Ilara, and I'm fairly certain I'm falling in love with you. The words hung between them like suspended stars. Ilara stood, closing the distance between them. She looked into his eyes and saw everything she'd been afraid to want. Safety, belonging, someone who saw her as more than useful. Fairly certain? She whispered. Completely certain. His hands cupped her face. Absolutely, terrifyingly certain. She kissed him, It was nothing like the careful, calculated touches they'd exchanged in public, brief gestures for watching eyes. This was real. His lips warm against hers, his hand sliding into her hair, the whole world narrowing to this moment, this man, this choice. When they finally broke apart, both breathing unsteadily, Ilara rested her forehead against his. "I'm falling in love with you too," she admitted. "I didn't plan to. I didn't want to. But here we are. Here we are." His arms wrapped around her, pulling her close. "Tomorrow we face the Hargroves. Tonight? Tonight we have this. Tonight we have this." He agreed. They stood there in the firelight, two people who had found each other in the wreckage of ruined lives, building something neither had expected. Tomorrow would bring war, but tonight, there was peace. The Lord Chancellor's chambers were designed to intimidate. Vaulted ceilings soared overhead. Portraits of severe-faced judges lined the walls. A massive desk dominated the room, behind which sat Lord Blackwood, a man whose reputation for ruthless fairness had made him the most feared arbiter in England. Ilara sat beside Soren, her hands folded in her lap, her expression calm, despite the storm raging inside her. Behind them, Agnes Whitmore waited, pale but determined. And across the room, summoned by the Chancellor's command, sat the Hargroves. Lord Hargrove's face was a mask of righteous indignation. Lady Hargrove dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. Delphine sat perfectly still, her smile fixed and poisonous. "We are here," Lord Blackwood began, his voice filling the chamber, "to examine allegations of fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit murder brought against the Hargrove family by His Grace, the Duke of Ravenmore, and Miss Ilara Vance." His cold eyes swept the room. "These are serious charges. I expect serious evidence." Soren rose. "My Lord Chancellor, the evidence we present today represents weeks of intensive investigation, corroborated by financial records, witness testimony, and documentation obtained from the Hargroves' own files." "Obtained illegally, no doubt," Lord Hargrove interrupted. "Stolen by that woman." He pointed at Ilara. "She was our bookkeeper. She had access to private documents. She violated our trust and now fabricates accusations to cover her own crimes." "Lord Hargrove," Blackwood said coolly, "you will have your opportunity to respond. Until then, you will remain silent." Soren continued, laying out the case with devastating precision. Shell companies that existed only on paper. Investments that had never been made. Pension funds emptied and replaced with forgeries. A systematic pattern of fraud stretching back decades. He presented bank records tracing the flow of stolen money. He produced affidavits from investigators who had verified every claim. He showed the forged documents designed to transfer his own properties to Hargrove control after his marriage to Delphine. With each piece of evidence, the Hargroves' composure cracked a little more. Then Ilara stood. "My Lord Chancellor, I was employed by the Hargrove family for 2 years. In that time, I discovered discrepancies in their accounts that troubled me deeply. When I investigated further, I found evidence of systematic fraud. Fraud designed to steal from investors who trusted them." "Why didn't you report this immediately?" Blackwood asked. "I tried. I sent an anonymous letter to the Duke of Ravenmore warning him of what I'd found. When the Hargroves discovered I was the source..." Her voice grew stronger. "They accused me of theft. They destroyed my reputation. And then they tried to kill me." "Those are outrageous accusations," Lady Hargrove cried. "We did nothing of the sort." "Then perhaps," Soren said in a low voice, "you can explain why 3 men with dogs hunted Miss Vance through Ashwood Forest 3 weeks ago. Why her sister received threatening visitors in Hampshire. Why a former Hargrove solicitor was found drowned 2 years ago after discovering similar discrepancies." Delphine laughed, the sound sharp and ugly. "This is absurd. You have no proof of any of this. Just the word of a disgraced bookkeeper and a jilted duke. Actually, Ilara said, we have more than that. She nodded to the door. Agnes Whitmore entered, her face pale but her voice firm as she approached the Chancellor's desk. My name is Agnes Whitmore. I was lady's maid to Lady Delphine Hargrove for 3 years, and I am prepared to testify to crimes I witnessed during my employment. The color drained from Delphine's face. This woman is lying. She's been paid. I haven't been paid anything, Agnes cut in, her voice rising. I've been terrified. Terrified of what your family does to people who cross them. But I'm done being afraid. She turned to the Chancellor. I heard Lord and Lady Hargrove discuss the elimination of Mr. Thomas Crane, the solicitor who discovered their fraud. I was present when Lady Delphine planned how to isolate the Duke of Ravenmore from his allies after their marriage. I saw documents burned, witnesses threatened, and I know. Her voice broke. I know that Miss Vance was meant to die in that forest. I heard them celebrate when they thought she had. Silence. Lord Hargrove rose, his face purple with fury. This is a conspiracy. These people have been paid to destroy my family's reputation. I demand. You demand nothing. Lord Blackwood's voice was ice. You will sit down, Lord Hargrove, or I will have you removed. Hargrove sat. The Chancellor studied the documents before him, the testimony he had heard, the trembling witness who had risked everything to speak. The evidence presented today is substantial and troubling. I am ordering a full investigation into the financial practices of Hargrove and Associates. All assets will be frozen pending the outcome. You can't, Delphine started. Furthermore, Blackwood continued, his voice hardening, based on the testimony regarding threats to Miss Vance's life and the suspicious death of Mr. Thomas Crane, I am ordering the immediate arrest of Lord and Lady Hargrove pending criminal investigation. Guards moved forward. Lady Hargrove screamed. Lord Hargrove shouted threats and denials. Delphine sat frozen, her perfect composure finally shattered. As they were led away, Lord Hargrove turned to Ilara, his eyes burning with hatred. This isn't over, he snarled. You're nothing, a bookkeeper, a nobody. We'll destroy you. No. Ilara's voice was soft, but carried through the chamber. You won't. Because I'm not nobody anymore. I'm the woman who survived you. And I'll be the woman who watches you pay for every life you've ruined. The doors closed behind them. In the sudden silence, Ilara felt her knees weaken. Soren's arm was around her instantly, holding her up. It's done, he murmured. You did it. We did it. She looked at Agnes, who was weeping with relief. At Lord Blackwood, who nodded with something that might have been respect. At the door through which the Hargroves had vanished, dragged toward a justice long overdue. It was done. They had won. 6 months later, Ilara stood in the gardens of Thornwood Manor, watching spring unfold across the estate. The trees were heavy with blossoms, the lake sparkled under a cloudless sky, and in the distance she could hear laughter, Marin playing with Mrs. Pemberton's grandchildren who had come to visit. So much had changed. The Hargrove trial had been the scandal of the decade. Lord Hargrove received 20 years in prison, Lady Hargrove, 10. Delphine, facing lesser charges but complete social ruin, had fled to the continent, her name synonymous with treachery. The families they had defrauded were being repaid from seized Hargrove assets. Agnes Whitmore had started a new life in Scotland under a new name, safe and free. And the name Ilara Vance, once spoken with contempt, was now spoken with respect. Footsteps approached behind her. You're thinking too loudly, Soren said, slipping his arms around her waist. I can hear it from inside. I'm remembering. She leaned back against him. A year ago, I was running through a forest in the rain, certain I was going to die. And now you're a duchess, a reformer, and the woman who brought down one of England's most powerful criminal families. His lips brushed her temple. Quite a transformation. I had help. You had partnership. There's a difference. Ilara turned in his arms, looking up at the man who had pulled her from the mud and offered her not just protection, but purpose. Not just strategy, but love. I received a letter this morning, she said, from Parliament. They want me to testify about financial reforms, protections for investors, oversight for investment houses. They want my expertise. Of course they do. You understand fraud better than anyone in England. It would mean spending time in London. Meetings, committees, politics. Soren smiled. Then I suppose I'll be spending time in London too. Someone has to make sure you eat during those meetings. She laughed, the sound bright and free, something she never could have imagined a year ago. I love you, she said. Have I mentioned that recently? Only 3 times today. You're falling behind. Then let me catch up. She kissed him softly. I love you. I love this life we're building. I love that we started as strangers with a common enemy and became everything. He finished. We became everything. They stood there in the spring sunlight, 2 people who had found each other in the darkest possible circumstances and built something luminous from the wreckage. Ilara had been left for dead by people who saw her as disposable. But Soren had seen something else: courage, integrity, and a fire that refused to be extinguished. And she had seen in him not just a title, but a man willing to fight for what was right. A partner who treated her as an equal. A love she hadn't known she was searching for until she found it. The Hargroves had tried to destroy them both. Instead, they had created something unbreakable. What are you thinking? Soren asked. I'm thinking about truth, Ilara said. About how I told it expecting to die, and instead it led me here. To a manor and a title and a devastatingly handsome husband? To a home. She smiled up at him. The first real one I've ever had. He pulled her closer, resting his forehead against hers. Then welcome home, Duchess. And thank you. For what? For shattering everything I thought I knew. His voice was soft. And showing me what was worth building instead. Ilara kissed him again as spring bloomed around them and the future stretched ahead, bright with possibility. She had survived the cold. She had spoken the truth. And against all odds, she had found her place in the world. Not as a bookkeeper, not as a victim, but as a woman who had fought for justice and won. That was a story worth telling. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. If this story moved you, if you believe in courage, truth, and second chances, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment telling us your favorite moment and where you're listening from. Subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss the next chapter. You're the reason these stories exist. Thank you for being here.